What's up, guys? It's Mike Way, West Main Auto in Waterbury, Connecticut. Today I'm working on a 2003 Ford Focus ZX5. It's got a 2-liter 4-cylinder engine. It came in the shop for a stalling problem. When I scanned it for codes, it had a lot of misfire codes. So the first thing that I thought about was that it needed a tune-up. I looked at the engine. I pulled a couple spark plugs. The spark plugs were messed up. The wires were shot. They look like the original wires. This car, again, has 150,000 miles. It came in for stalling issues. Changed the plugs, changed the wires, changed even the ignition coil with all genuine parts. The car is still having the same problem. Intermittently, it stalls. Pulled codes again. It didn't put a check engine light on, but I had pending codes for P0300, which is a random misfire. And I also had all 4 cylinders on misfire data. It had misfires intermittently, obviously. It wasn't misfiring currently when I was had the live data up there, but I know the 4 cylinders were misfiring. So what I figured out is the car intermittently stalls. So at one point the car started acting up in front of me. I just thought maybe the EGR valve was messing up, causing the thing misfire and stall. So I unplugged the EGR valve while the car was malfunctioning, not running properly, and the thing ran perfect. So the first thing I'm thinking is, okay, I didn't do much testing. I just thought off the top of my head, okay, it's got to be the EGR pressure sensor telling the EGR solenoid to open up at the wrong time, because it must be defective and it's not thermal code. So what I did was I got a brand new EGR pressure sensor, and it didn't do a job. So I thought at first, because I got the EGR pressure sensor aftermarket, I thought maybe I got a defective part out of the box. So what I did was I put the old EGR pressure sensor on, and it was doing the same exact thing. I was getting the condition, because it's intermittent condition, but I was getting the condition right now. I put the old EGR pressure sensor on, it was doing the same thing. I even disconnected the EGR pressure sensor while the car was running, and it was still acting the same way, about to stall, running rough, misfiring. So now I started thinking, okay, what's opening the EGR valve and causing this car to stall? Because anytime I unplug the EGR valve while the car is running, it idles perfect, it's running, it's good. So I know the EGR valve is open up at the wrong time, and why? It's not the EGR pressure sensor, because obviously I got a brand new part. I even unplugged the pressure sensor, but the EGR valve is still opening up. So there's only one other component between the pressure sensor and the EGR valve, and that's the solenoid. When the car gets the command from the computer to open up that EGR valve, it sends a signal to this solenoid right here. When it sends the signal to the solenoid, it opens up, and the EGR valve gets engine vacuum. So what's supposed to happen is this valve is supposed to be shut, because it's always getting engine vacuum to this nipple right here. So when this valve is energized and opens up, it also allows vacuum to come out of this nipple. So I suspected the solenoid has to be failed, because it's getting a vacuum all the time, intermittently, because this is an electronic solenoid, and it's a motor, and motors intermittently fail before they just don't work at all anymore. So this is my test to make sure that this car's problem is the EGR solenoid. So I got a tube. What I suspect is it's gonna be leaking. It's gonna be leaking vacuum, engine vacuum into the EGR valve. This is why the EGR valve is opening up and causing the car to stall. I'm gonna test easy. I'm gonna put a vacuum tube here. I'm gonna apply vacuum here. Now, if I can pull vacuum here, I know this is leaking and it's not working properly. And it's leaking vacuum. So I'm gonna do one more test, because I know this has already failed, but I wanna see when I put an ohm meter here, what the reading shows. So give me 1 second, right? Hold this. Let me get my ohm meter. Okay, So I got my multimeter. I can measure the resistance of the solenoid, and I can also see if there's continuity. I also have a power probe here. I can energize the solenoid and see if it's clicking, if it's working. I know it's not working, but I just want to see what a failed solenoid does and what it looks like. Because I am making this video because I want to show you guys how to test a solenoid and make sure it works or not. So that was the first test that you could test a solenoid with, is applying vacuum and see if it leaks. Now, sometimes solenoids leak anyway. They're open without being energized, and once they're energized, the solenoid closes, and that's when it closes the vacuum. So some solenoids are different. Okay, so first thing I'm going to do with this solenoid, I'm going to energize it. Actually, before I even energize it and mess up the windings inside, here, point the camera on me, please, because I want to be clear about this. Before I energize it, I want to put a multimeter on both terminals in here and see what happens. I want to see even if I have continuity. I'm going to turn the multimeter onto ohms. I'm going to engage the speaker so we can hear if it has continuity or not. Now, I'm going to put this multimeter down, but I'm going to touch both these prongs. Right now, you can hear if the multimeter has continuity. We're going to see if this has continuity. And this one does. So see, sometimes a solenoid could even be failed with continuity. Okay, so the next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to energize it. I'm going to energize the solenoid and see if it stops leaking vacuum at this nipple. Because if it does, then I know this is the type of solenoid that always has vacuum when it's off, but when it's on, it closes the vacuum path off. I'm going to energize it and see. I'm going to energize it, and while it's energized, I'm going to put vacuum here and see if it keeps leaking or not. I'm going to turn this off. Okay, I'm going to energize it, and when I energize it, I don't hear it click. So I know it still has continuity, but I didn't even check the resistance, and I'm sorry, but I'm going to check the resistance after. It has no continuity because it has continuity, but it's not clicking. That means the solenoid is not working. And even if I energize it and I put vacuum, I'm going to see if it's leaking. And it's still leaking. So the third test that I did was I energized solenoid and I applied vacuum and it's leaking. So out of the 3 tests that we did, it already failed 2 tests. It's leaking to begin with. It's leaking when it's energized. It's got continuity, but let's see the resistance of a failed solenoid that's not working. There's easier ways to do this too, but this is just something fast. This solenoid has, I'm sorry, the freaking thing is going crazy because I don't think I have it hooked up right. It's moving all around. Can you hold this please for me? But point the camera at the multimeter. Let me readjust these pins because they may be touching each other. Okay, so this should be the continuity right here. It's jumping around everywhere. It's jumping around everywhere. Okay, so this concludes my video of how to test a solenoid. Again, this was a 2003 Ford Focus CX-5 with a 2-liter 4-cylinder, twin cam. It came in for intermittent stalling. We found out that the EGR valve was opening up. It was allowing the exhaust gas into the intake and allowing the car to stall, misfire. We're going to change the solenoid, and I guarantee the EGR valve is going to open up when it's supposed to, and it's not going to allow the car to stall anymore. Thanks again. My name is Mike Way, West Main Auto. Thanks. Waterbury, Connecticut.